Friends, listeners, fellow travelers through time, have you ever considered the quiet moments in history? The seemingly ordinary days when the fate of nations, even civilizations, hung by a thread, unseen by most? The moments when collective choices, or the lack thereof, carved irreversible paths, shaping not just the present, but generations yet unborn. Today I want to take you back to such a crossroads, to a time when a nation, bruised and battered by war and economic despair, stood on the precipice of a choice that would echo with devastating clarity for decades to come. It's a story not just of politics and power, but of human nature, of hope and fear, and the profound responsibility that rests upon every citizen in a democracy. The year was 1932. Germany, a land still grappling with the scars of the Great War and the crushing weight of the Great Depression, was a crucible of discontent. Its fledgling democracy, the Weimar Republic, was struggling, buffeted by extremist ideologies from both the left and the right. In this turbulent atmosphere, the nation prepared for a monumental decision, the presidential election. This wasn't merely a contest of personalities. It was a battle for the very soul of Germany, a struggle between the promise of stability and the siren song of radical change. At the heart of this struggle stood an unlikely figure, the venerable Field Marshal Paul Hindenburg. At 84 years old, a towering symbol of Germany's imperial past, Hindenburg was the incumbent president. He was weary, his health failing, and initially he wished for nothing more than to retire from the relentless demands of public life. But in times of crisis, sometimes the people turned to familiar anchors. A groundswell of support, an astonishing collection of 3 million signatures, implored him to stand for re-election. They saw in him not just a leader, but a bulwark against the rising tides of extremism, a defender of the very constitution he had once been hesitant to fully embrace. He was persuaded, stepping back into the fray, positioning himself as the embodiment of order. A quiet strength in a tumultuous age, a guardian of the fragile Weimar democracy. His campaign was less about grand promises and more about reassuring stability, a steady hand in a tumultuous age. But against this aged statesman, formidable and dangerous new force was gathering momentum: Adolf Hitler, a charismatic and incendiary leader of the Nazi Party, for years. Hitler had been a stateless man, having renounced his Austrian citizenship in 1925. A calculated move to fully embed himself in German politics. Yet without German citizenship, he was ineligible to run for the highest office. This obstacle, however, was merely a temporary inconvenience for a man so driven by ambition. Through a series of political maneuvers, rather dubious appointment to a minor government position in the state of Brunswick, Hitler was granted German citizenship on February 25, 1932, just weeks before the election. This seemingly bureaucratic act was a pivotal moment, a quiet turning point that unlocked his path to power, making him a legitimate contender for the presidency. Hitler's entry into the race immediately transformed the political landscape. He was a whirlwind of energy, crisscrossing the country by plane, an unprecedented campaign strategy that captivated the masses. His message was sharp, visceral, and uncompromising. He vehemently rejected any proposals to simply extend Hindenburg's term, viewing it as a sign of weakness and a perpetuation of the very system he sought to dismantle. Instead, he launched a scathing attack on what he branded as the 13 wasted years of the Weimar Republic. He decried the perceived failures, the economic hardship, the national humiliation, and the political instability. He promised not just change, but a complete rebirth, a strong, unified state under his unyielding leadership. It was a vision that resonated deeply with a populace yearning for decisiveness, for a return to perceived national glory, and for an end to the endless bickering of parliamentary democracy. What made Hitler's appeal particularly potent was his shrewd adaptability. While the Nazi Party's early rhetoric had often contained elements of anti-capitalist sentiment, a socialist tinge in its National Socialist moniker, Hitler understood that to achieve ultimate power, he needed the backing of Germany's powerful industrial magnates. In a calculated strategic pivot, he began to reassure big industry, subtly abandoning the more radical socialist aspects of his party's platform. He promised to protect free enterprise, to restore order, and crucially, to eradicate the looming threat of communism, which was seen as a grave danger by the industrial elite. This promise of stability for business, coupled with the pledge to crush the perceived Red Menace, began to win over powerful, influential allies, providing financial backing and a veneer of respectability to his increasingly mainstream campaign. The election, however, wasn't just a two-horse race. There were other voices vying for the nation's attention, representing the fractured political spectrum. On the far left stood Ernst Thälmann, the leader of the Communist Party, who campaigned on a platform of radical social change, appealing to the working class disillusioned by both capitalism and the Weimar government. Then there was Theodor Düster, representing the German National People's Party DNVP, a conservative nationalist who sought to restore a more traditional, authoritarian Germany. Yet Düster's campaign, which might have otherwise drawn support from the right, was severely damaged by a damaging revelation: the discovery of his Jewish grandfather. In a climate of rising anti-Semitism, this detail, however irrelevant to his policies, was weaponized by his opponents, effectively crippling his chances and further consolidating the nationalist vote around Hitler. As the first round of the election approached on March 13, 1932, the tension was palpable. The stakes were incredibly high, and the German people responded with a remarkable display of civic engagement. Voter turnout was exceptionally high, reaching an impressive 86.2%. The results, when they finally came in, painted a stark picture of a deeply divided nation, but also one teetering on the brink. Hindenburg, the stoic defender of the Republic, secured a commanding 49.54% of the vote, agonizingly close to the outright majority needed for victory. Adolf Hitler, the revolutionary challenger, garnered a significant 30.12%, a powerful statement of his growing influence and the widespread dissatisfaction he tapped into. Ernst Thälmann, the communist, managed 13.24%, demonstrating the strength of the left-wing opposition. With no candidate achieving an absolute majority, the stage was set for a runoff election, a second, even more critical showdown that would determine Germany's future. In the aftermath of the first round, the political landscape continued to shift precariously. Chancellor Henry Brunn, a staunch Hindenburg supporter and a leader striving to navigate Germany through its economic woes, found his credibility steadily declining. His diplomatic efforts to alleviate Germany's war reparations burden were failing. His austerity measures, while perhaps necessary, were deeply unpopular. As Brunn's government struggled, Hitler's prominence only grew. He had proven himself a formidable force, no longer a fringe agitator but a legitimate contender for the highest office. The initial sense of relief that Hindenburg had nearly won was quickly overshadowed by the chilling realization of Hitler's undeniable strength. His campaign machinery, fueled by a potent blend of propaganda and fervent rallies, was relentless, painting him as the only man capable of restoring Germany's pride and prosperity. The nation now stood at a terrifying crossroads. The first round had been a warning shot, a clear signal of the deep fissures within German society and the potent appeal of radical promises in times of desperation. The choice before them was stark: a continuation of the old order, however imperfect, or a leap into the unknown with a man who promised salvation but demanded absolute power. The coming runoff would not just decide a presidency. It would decide the very nature of Germany, and in doing so, cast a long, dark shadow across the entire world. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, a moment when the fate of millions would be decided by the swing of a few percentage points, by the decisions made in countless polling booths across a weary land. What lessons, I wonder, can we draw from such a pivotal, perilous moment in history as we consider the choices we face in our own times? The echoes of 1932, my friends, are louder than we might imagine.